are here.
¿Cómo tú estás, mi vida? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
He querido explicar las circunstancias de mi salida de Cuba y aprovechar la atención que sobre ese hecho se ha generado para hablar sobre lo que más importa, sobre quienes sufren injusta prisión por defender nuestras libertades y derechos.
Bueno, yo creo que lo que sucedió fue que la gente se sacó de la garganta lo que tenía atorado durante más de 60 años, ¿no? Creo que se unió la falta de derechos, la falta de libertades y una situación extrema de vida.
Comenzó siendo un puñado de manifestantes en el pueblo de San Antonio de los Baños, se multiplicaría hasta convertirse en un auténtico levantamiento ciudadano.
Y la llegada de Internet a Cuba reconfiguró el país, le cambió la fisionomía y eso gestó una nueva sociedad civil con artistas, periodistas y opositores.
El gobierno respondió a las protestas con desprecio, respondió con violencia, respondió con descrédito.
Justamente que hoy la mayoría de esa sociedad civil esté en el exilio o esté en prisión.
¡Revolución cubana!
Bueno, nada, esta es la cocina. Un poco todavía estamos armando la casa. Solo llevamos 3 semanas acá en Europa, en Barcelona. Y tiene este pequeño patio que da a las 3 casas. Un piso bien pequeño. Fue lo que pudimos conseguir así de rápido acá en Barcelona. Bueno, esta es la sala, que de pronto se convertirá en mi oficina. De hecho, ya lo está haciendo. Hay como me gusta mucho la vista porque un poco salvando las distancias podría ser Cuba, sobre todo como La Habana Vieja. Y adoquinada, entonces está bien tener esa como vista.
Abraham worked as an independent journalist in Havana. That included writing a column for the Washington Post. He did not follow the Communist Party line and paid the price for it. He says he was kidnapped, threatened, and arrested by state security. After Abraham covered the anti-government protests in 2021, the authorities tried a new tactic. They gave him a choice: get a passport and leave Cuba immediately, or stay on the island forever. Abraham, like activist and art historian Carolina Barrero, was forced into exile.
Bueno, no me queda claro si todo el mundo sabe que Cuba es una dictadura. Mucha gente sigue pensando que Cuba es de izquierda, mucha gente se sigue abrazando al romanticismo de 1959. Hay un mito sobre esa isla y un mito que poco a poco se va deconstruyendo, sobre todo por la llegada de Internet, que ha hecho que se exporte la realidad de la isla.
De los enemigos de nuestro pueblo.
Eso no es cierto.
Está bien. Se lo dije el otro día cuando vine y se lo vuelvo a repetir hoy. Que no le vamos a permitir esta actividad.
Esto es como un buen ejemplo para demostrar por qué en Cuba no hace falta darle un disparo en la cabeza a nadie. Si de pronto un día tú vas a salir a la calle y se te paran fuera unas personas que no te dejan salir y te rodean fuerzas policiales, y si sales te entran a golpe, te cargan, te llevan preso, obviamente te empujan a coartarte tu libertad, tu ser, ¿no? Parece un culto fundamentalista, es lo que parece esto. Bueno, es un culto fundamentalista.
The video Abraham is watching shows dissident playwright Yunior García being falsely accused of aiding enemies of the people. Shortly after, Yunior fled Havana for Spain. Most Cubans are afraid to speak out against the regime. What keeps them silent? And is exile the only way to have a voice? Before becoming a dictator, Cuban revolutionary Fidel Castro forced one out of power, Fulgencio Batista. Batista was brutal, first as a military strongman and then as a civilian president backed by the United States. Castro promised freedom from his corruption and tyranny.
Es decir, cuando tú miras teóricamente lo que intentó ser la Revolución Cubana, es muy difícil no enamorarse de eso. Y claro, Fidel fue lo mismo para el pueblo cubano.
Fidel Castro and his guerrilla movement, which included the charismatic but ruthless Ernesto Che Guevara, vowed to fight foreign imperialism and deliver free access to healthcare, education, and art. Their socialist ideals capture hearts and minds. Just look at this iconic photograph of Che Guevara taken by Alberto Korda in 1960. It went viral before going viral was a thing. Korda's passion for the revolution won him intimate access to its leaders, who understood the power of propaganda. The Castro government invested in art schools that nurtured dancers, painters, musicians, and even graphic designers to glorify the revolution. They fueled a sort of PR machine, on and off the island.
Fidel y la propia revolución proponían una cosa que eran dos mundos paralelos, uno a nivel gubernamental en sus discursos y otro la realidad. Y eso se rompió. Lo que pasa es que a golpe de represión los cubanos no pueden hacer cambiar las cosas y la revolución, el régimen hace callar esa inconformidad. Y entonces esa brecha entre esos dos mundos, entre el mundo ficticio del que habla el gobierno cubano y la realidad que vive el pueblo cubano, el gobierno la pega a golpe de represión, la pega a golpe de fuerza, a golpe de látigo, haciéndolos callar e imponiendo una vida que no existe.
When the Soviet Union collapsed, its support of Cuba collapsed too. The Cuban regime allowed artists to travel abroad to sell their work. This increased tourism, brought in revenue, and improved the facade that Cubans had freedom. Artists became a special, elevated class that could gently criticize but not condemn the government. A shift began in the mid-1990s that tested the loyalty of state-sanctioned artists. Facing economic ruin, the government cut food rations, electricity, and even water supplies. Tens of thousands of hungry, angry Cubans fled the country on rafts. The crisis inspired a kind of Cuban spring of protest. Independent libraries and press agencies sprouted. A pro-democracy movement took root, and artists such as Tania Bruguera began to use their limited freedom to fight for more rights. Daughter of a devout Fidelista, she rocked her family and the Cuban art world with politically provocative performances. One of her pieces gave people a minute to say whatever they wanted on stage before two actors in military uniform dragged them away. Bruguera did something remarkable. By taking an unambiguous stance against repression, the art that had helped legitimize the system was used against it.
In Cuba, a lot of artists who are comfortable and they are, let's say, collaborating with the system, they get really intense when they see somebody else getting recognition for an art that is critical, because they feel threatened. They almost feel that is a comment on their attitude, you know, which maybe that is, but that's up to them, you know.
Artists in Cuba have a choice to go along and live a comfortable life or fight the regime and risk everything. This tension ripples across the island.
La Constitución de la República no reconoce ninguna otra organización política. La mayoría de las personas, para sentirse personas en ese país, tienen que afiliarse al Partido Comunista para tener un buen trabajo, para tener una buena escuela, en fin. Entonces, la mayoría de la gente obrera o apegada, de hecho, mi madre perdió su trabajo por ser mi madre. tenía un puesto de 20 años, abogada, y para presionarme a mí, la expulsaron de su trabajo. Mi padre se tuvo que jubilar, mi hermano igual. Ellos son dueños de todo, son los dueños de la isla, por eso es el totalitarismo.
Like Abraham, activist Carolina Barrero was forced into exile.
There is a famous phrase of Fidel Castro, inside the revolution everything, outside the revolution nothing. Of course that's ambiguous, but what it is doing is installing the censorship and the sense that, okay, you can be ambiguous, you can be critical, but there are some limits of that.
The regime tightened those limits in 2018 with Decree 349. The law prohibits artists, musicians, and performers from doing their work in public or private without prior approval. A collective of artists, journalists, and academics formed the San Isidro movement to protest the law, staging poetry readings, sittings, and a hunger strike. The Minister of Culture eventually read their demands.
For the rest of the country to watch that it was possible to actually, face authoritarian power. It was a possibility, a real possibility, because before that, it was kind of a social anesthesia, right? So it kind of break the inertia. I think artists break that inertia and made protest possible for the rest.
Momentum built, and on July 11, 2021, mass protests erupted that dwarfed even those that spurred the 1994 raft exodus. This time, the movement had a soundtrack, Patria y Vida.
Y eres tú mi canto de sirena, porque con tu voz se van mis penas.
The song Patria y Vida, which means homeland and life, came out a few months before the July protest. It became a massive hit.
Y el Latin Grammy va para Patria y Vida.
It has become an anthem of resistance for Cubans around the world. Its lyrics are a play on the 1959 revolutionary slogan, Homeland or Death.
La muerte es el fin y Patria o Muerte era justamente eso. Lo que quería decir Fidel Castro cuando instauró su frase era o estás con nosotros o estás muerto o no vas a tener vida. Y justamente lo que ha querido rescatar Patria y Vida es que la patria no es solo del régimen cubano y que hay espacio para todos en ese país.
While the song pulsed through Cuba, videos of the unrest spread around the world, shattering the image of a communist utopia the regime had worked so hard to sell. By the end of July 2021, the government had militarized the streets and arrested hundreds of Cubans, some of them minors. Carolina protested with the political prisoners' families, but met the limits of her own freedom in early 2022.
They arrest all the families of the ones being judged, including 6 minors, and the activists that were there, doing companion to the families. They arrest all of us, and during the interrogation they gave me 48 hours to leave the country. They say if I didn't go, they will charge the mothers, the families, and the activists with a public disorder.
The Cuban government forced Carolina, Abraham, and others such as playwright Junior García off the island to stifle their protests. They're now part of a diaspora community of more than 2 million Cubans. But exile has not silenced them.
El exilio tiene un papel imprescindible y además lo ha tenido a lo largo de la historia. Las principales gestas independentistas de Cuba se planearon y se organizaron en el exilio. Incluso, como dijo Carolina, la propia revolución cubana, aunque para mí hace mucho tiempo dejó de ser una revolución, se organizó desde el exilio. Desde dentro es prácticamente imposible, porque dentro de una dictadura, si no puedes reunirte, si no puedes expresar tus ideas, si no te dejan salir de tu casa, es muy difícil organizar algo sólido.
The regime has tried to inoculate this idea that if you are abroad, you kind of are out of the game. But this is something that it's being put there as for, separating people and
to create that sense of that you cannot do nothing from outside, but it is not true.
Though they fear reprisals, even in Europe, Carolina is speaking out, and Abraham is still writing his columns about Cuba for the Washington Post.
Y aún no siento, digamos, esa distancia con respecto a Cuba, que mucha gente, cubanos que he encontrado acá, me hablan de que, bueno, eso, el país un poco te empieza a quedar lejos luego, ¿no? Leo las noticias, estoy al tanto de todo lo que está pasando y todavía me parece que estoy ahí, pero con la sensación, obviamente, de ya no estar allí y de sentir la impotencia un poco más, ¿no? De ya ni siquiera, no sé, poderle pasar la mano por los hombros a los tuyos.
For more than 60 years, Cuba has propagated the myth of an island utopia where equality and human rights reign supreme. The reality is far from it. A totalitarian state where critics can end up dead or alive as social pariahs and prisoners. The government has forced out dissidents to maintain its lie. Cuban exiles who speak the truth face painful questions. How can they fight for Cuba while trying to survive in a new country? And what can they achieve from so far away?